Hello, I am Mayor Watt. I host OhmTown here on Twitch, and there's ohmTown.com. You see that up there, right there, right there? So, anyways, um, this is the ohmTown Daily News Show. Basically, it's a daily news show where I aggregate a bunch of news over at ohmTown.com. I grab about 20 articles and I talk about them briefly from the context of business, society, and technology, merged into a hot mess of random thoughts and soapboxing. Maybe not entirely like that, but let's get into it. The very first article is actually an old one, and I just thought that it was interesting. And it's about Marvel Snap, which is a really quick uh, digital collector card game from Marvel. And there is, let's just click the link, and it'll take us over to The Verge, who wrote about it about 3 days ago. But it popped up on my radar earlier today, again, from when I first saw it. But I don't normally, I don't know, card games and like, Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, they've been around for such a long time that I don't really highlight them. But in this particular case, I said, let's revisit this, mainly because these are supposed to be really fast games, like 3 minutes, and everybody plays at the same time. And I think that's really kind of a game changer, so to speak. I guess you could call it that. And I used to play a game when I was younger called Speed, which was just using a deck of cards. You play cards higher or lower than the card that is facing up. And you play as fast as you can. And I love the idea of these fast-paced games because they're really high energy and you can get really into it. And it isn't kind of like in decision purgatory unless you artificially hang a clock next to you, like in chess, where you have to, win the game because the clock is ticking. That's kind of superfluous. It's been added to kind of force you to make a decision. But in this game, it's one and the same. You basically make decisions quickly. And I love the idea of that. So I'm waiting for it to come out. I'm not in the beta. There's a beta that is for a limited beta for Android only right now. This article, although everything that I'm talking about, I've gotten from everywhere else, really. This article was aggregated from The Verge, and it was written by Ash Parrish. And they've got a video, so you can actually see it on YouTube. But it really is just a new style of collectible card game, and there will be multiple cards from the same type of character because it is the Marvel Cinematic Multiverse. Although everybody refers to it as the MCU, it's really a multiverse now. So you can have multiples of Kang the Conqueror or Scarlet Witch or whoever else, really. Any Marvel character that's been released can have multiple versions of it with different powers, slightly different powers. So it'll be pretty neat. Go and check it out. And let me do something real quick because I failed to bring my chat over so that I can throw this link into chat. If you are oh so motivated, you can go and check it out yourself. The next article is Americans' net worth has plunged in 2022 and billionaires are the biggest losers. I don't know if that's a statement about their wealth, but the idea that Americans' net worth has plunged in 2022 and billionaires are the biggest losers kind of fails to acknowledge the fact that losing $10 billion as a billionaire with $50 billion is a whole lot different than somebody losing $25,000 and being scourged by inflation and things no longer being available because of supply chain issues. And, without belaboring it, the middle class is bearing the burden of net worth declines dramatically higher than billionaires, because billionaires can make money simply picking their nose, sitting on the couch, and most Americans cannot. Most people cannot. But we are creating and essentially allowing and encouraging the creation of American oligarchs who are financially beyond approach and politically connected and highly influential, so much so that them saying to a bunch of adherents, hey, change your political party, and a bunch of people will do it simply because they think that they are just a few moments, a chef's kiss away from being a billionaire themselves. And it's just not true. And there might be a few, but they're usually already silver spoons, politically connected, never really having to work a day in their life. So take this article with a grain of salt, that the billionaires are the biggest losers, but they're not. The American middle class is being hammered. So Wei-Ling Tan is the author of this article over at businessinsider.com. And so it says here, billionaires are the biggest losers. Their collective wealth has crashed by $800 billion since November. But how much of that is a value of the survivability of this coming era of economic decline and recession and inflation and death by 1,000 cuts, essentially? I would hazard a guess that it's not much as a metric of their actual worth. Plain and simple. They haven't lost much as a portion of their, let's just call it a survivor index. If they have the ability to survive this versus the middle class in totality surviving this, you could probably wager against and win that the middle class is not going to survive the same way that this upper echelon of billionaires is going to survive this. And without that human component, that sympathy, compassion, understanding, you're basically discounting the human existence that made all of this possible. None of these billionaires would be able to exist if not for consumers. Yet, consumers are ultimately going to pay the price. Let's continue on. Right? So just in case you're curious, you can go over to that Business Insider article about how billionaires, are just losing everything. They're losing their shirt. My goodness. Okay, well, the next article is over on the Hatch Ideas channel. And it is Johnny Depp bought a yacht in 2007 that has a pirate ship theme and can fit 10 guests. Let's take a look at it. So I'm going to click the link, and it'll take us over to this article that I just threw in the chat. And it's an article by Marielle Descalsoda, I guess is the last name, Descalsoda. The article's over at businessinsider.com. By the way, I'm a little distracted because I ended up watching a little bit of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial because there's supposed to be a rumor that Johnny Depp's going to go on the stand, and I'm really curious about. He's been on it before in other ways, but we're coming up towards the end of the trial, and they just had an expert witness on that was asked a question by one of Depp's attorneys, and the dude actually said, I think I explained this quite nicely earlier, and didn't answer the question, and everybody in the courtroom basically lost their mind and started laughing. No, sir. Sorry. When you're asked a question, even if you do have to reiterate it, unless the other side, depending on if it's the defense or plaintiff that is asking the questions, they can say asked and answered. But that's not the case in this particular case because it wasn't actually answered in that context. So it was really interesting. I just kind of started laughing about it. And it just happened to be that this article came down too. So I think that it's interesting that he has a pirate themed yacht from 2007. And Marielle Descalsoda wrote this article as well over at businessinsider.com. The yacht is known for its Art Deco style interior and pirate ship design. It is pirate ship-y, but it is not a sailing yacht. It is a yacht. For an undisclosed price in 2007, and Depp sold the yacht to J.K. Rowling in 2015 for $27 million. So, you know, I've been told that there are 2 times in a boat owner's life that is overcome with joy: when you buy a boat and when you sell a boat. Yeah, I've never owned a boat, but I've driven speedboats, not yachts. Depp purchased the Turkish-made yacht for an undisclosed amount and named it Fahir. I'm asking for trouble by saying this. Anyway, at the time he was dating Vanessa Paradis. The yacht name is a combination of their names along with their children, Lily Rose and Jack. Oh, okay. So I guess there's no way to say that name. I don't know if the J is an H or whatever, but anyway, there you go. When Depp married Amber Heard in 2015, he renamed the yacht Amphitrite? Amphitrite? I don't know. I don't know why you would name it that. 15 months after the wedding, Heard filed for divorce. The pair is now embroiled in a bitter trial that began in April. Yeah, it's actually on my screen right there. And it's weird. Okay. So let's move on to the next article. In the never-ending mergers and acquisitions and breaking things off and so on and so forth, VMware is now kind of, I don't know, possibly being sold off to Broadcom. So if you're not familiar with VMware, VMware is a virtual machine. I don't know how to describe. Actually, it now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of difficult to describe what VMware. It's a piece of software that sits on the metal of the computer and acts as a way to interact with virtual machines that are stored on that compute resource. For lack of a better way of saying it, it is a condominium foundation for a whole host of condos in computer form, and you just can pile a bunch in there and access them through a different interface. Through ESXi, VMware allows you to noodle around with these virtual machines on the enterprise side, or if you install VMware on your personal computer, you can run multiple software-based virtual machines within the VMware environment. So it's immensely popular in places where you want to try out or utilize compartmentalized computers, either for specific computing purposes or because you run something like a Mac or a PC and you want to try other operating systems on that operating system. I might have actually made that worse. At any rate, VMware used to be all by itself, and then it got purchased by EMC, and then it got purchased by Dell. And now Dell is breaking it off, possibly, and selling it to Broadcom. Interesting, right? But it allows you to run multiple computers, and that's the really important thing. So if you are interested in some domain, something that you are not really interested in running always on your computer, you can run a virtual machine of this software, and it's in a secured environment that typically won't break out and cause issues on your host on your main computer. So it's a lot of fun, particularly if you're in computer science or IT or cybersecurity. This article is over at MarketWatch, and it's written by Mike Murphy, and it was published yesterday late at night, but they've updated it since then, early this morning. And they always, the MarketWatch, CNBC, other websites typically that talk about business have reference symbols, so they're talking about VMware and Broadcom. So it's all this does really is move who is in control of this over a little bit, and probably won't do much. That said, it is really expensive to deploy VMware on the enterprise side, but the amount of money that's involved typically for an enterprise is quite high. So if you're interested more about this, please go over to MarketWatch and read more about it. Basically what I said is the summary of it. So the next article, and I've not even begun to hear about this, is Curse of Eternity is a dystopian action RPG set to release for PC in 2022. It says, start with Gladiator, Assassin, or Mage and build your own warrior to take down Vidrahada. Let's click the link. It takes us over to rpgsite.net and an article by Adam Vitale. The 5th annual Indie Live Expo took place this past weekend, featuring hundreds of games from developers across the world. We here at RPG Site decided to quickly spotlight some of the RPGs shown in the stream, and they're talking about Curse of Eternity, which is an action RPG developed by Imakita Games, set for release on Steam. And in a dystopian world, players choose the Gladiator, Assassin, or Mage and customize their build to take on the guardians of the demigoddess Midrata. So what do you think? Brutal combat, epic boss fights, play to your strengths, explore the last remnants of humanity. This is all information from the publisher Imakita Games. So go check it out, and if you're interested in this kind of thing, it's an indie game, and I'm not quite sure of the graphic style. There's a video that's over on YouTube, and you can pull up, just do a search for Curse of Eternity announcement trailer, and you'll find it. Or you can follow the link in the chat or in the show notes, and it'll take you over to rpgsite.net. Let's continue on. The next article is in the Mobile Channel, and in Culture Wars, teachers are under attack. Today's Culture Wars treat teachers like political prisoners, or even worse, the enemy. And that's really a true story. We are in a time of anti-intellectualism where facts and science are downplayed and almost seen as a threat to ideological bents that aren't founded in science or reality in any way, shape, or form. And so this article from a guest essay at New York Times, it says, a thank you note to teachers after a year under attack. And this, I don't think, is the end of it. I think that there's going to be quite a bit more coming. And this is an article by Margaret Renkel. Ms. Renkel is a contributing opinion writer who covers flora, fauna, politics, and culture in the American South. And this article starts out apparently in Nashville, and they describe their grandmother was still a teenager, starting her teaching career. And kind of goes on. It says, as discriminatory policies so often do, this one backfired. There weren't enough licensed teachers to staff the schools, especially in the deep rural areas. From time to time, the superintendent would beg my grandmother to come back and finish out the school year for a teacher who was leaving, and my grandmother always did. So educators are what educators are. They tend to be, every once in a while, you'll find one that is politically oriented, that wants to change the dynamic and might speak on that term. And there's a phrase that we hear in various circles referred to as academic freedom, where a professor or teacher teaches something of specific interest and might show some bias in that point, but it's typical for a professor. And if you've ever gone through school, like most of us should, if not all, I should say all of us should, but sometimes people just aren't driven to pursue higher degrees. And so you really do need an education. You need to get a high school degree, high school diploma. You need to get a 2-year degree. You need to get a 4-year degree. And you can skip the 2-year and go to the 4-year. It's much more expensive, and there is no ladder there. You don't stack your credentials. You can, but for the most part, you should get a bachelor's degree. It's go to a school that has a more holistic understanding of the human condition, so that when you exit, you aren't just in an echo chamber reinforcing whatever you have grown up already knowing. Why? Because there's a whole vast wide world out there. But right now, teachers, education, science is being downplayed because there is a loud vocal minority that wants to keep people uninformed about the more holistic understanding of the human condition. When I hear politicians say that some women are overeducated and unloved because of it, it makes me wonder exactly what is happening in this world. It's kind of like the multiverse has pulled me into an existence that is just broken. It is the multiverse of madness that I seem to be in. So not really one of the reasons why I put this together, but I put this show together. I put ohmTown together so that I could have a better understanding of what's going on out there in the world. Now, I have a pretty expansive worldview, and my news comes from around the world, but I'm still missing segments of awareness, of understanding, particularly in countries that are oppressed, because the information doesn't get exfiltrated in a timely manner or any real way. You get marketed what you are, you get marketed an image and impression, right? We've been told that were no issues in North Korea, and then suddenly we find out that there's 350,000 cases in North Korea a day. So it's all about really marketing when you're talking about what seems to be happening today. So support your educators. They are your best tool against ignorance, because you don't know what you don't know, and educators kind of force you to learn because your grades depend on you learning material, understanding it, forming your own opinion about that information, and then stating it, usually in research papers or in journals or some way, learning the material and then demonstrating. And it's not just about math. It's not just about science. There's a lot more to it. So please go over and read this article over at the New York Times. It will enlighten you as to this person's perception about teachers and their thank you note to at least their grandmother. But I'm going to continue on. Can't spend too much time on any one particular article. We can in later sessions where the channel is brought online here on Twitch and on YouTube, and then we can have a discussion about particular topics. I don't know why this happened, but I have 2 articles at least that have to do with Depp Heard. the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial isn't even the weirdest thing about America right now. And this article is from New York Times, and it says, well, maybe it is, but there's a lot to choose from. Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty rich soup of weirdness going on here in the United States right now, maybe in the world. And this article is by Gail Collins and Brett Stevens over at New York Times. It might be Steffens. And it's really kind of a discussion back and forth between the two. They say, hi, Gail, it looks like I won't be vacationing to Vladivostok anytime soon, or Omsk, or Tomsk, or Yakutsk, or Smolensk, for that matter. And they're talking about the invasion. This person woke up on Saturday to the news that their name was on a list of 963 Americans barred for life by the Russian Foreign Ministry from visiting Mother Russia, which is about as upsetting as waking up for a call from your doctor saying it isn't cancer, or a message from an ex that reads, I was wrong about everything. I've received that phone call. I've received both of them, actually. And so they're just having this discussion. And I can't really go through all of it, but it is interesting, right? So it says, okay, we're now at disagreement central. Men who are subject to those kinds of accusations obviously deserve to have their defenses listened to, and nobody should automatically be seen as guilty until the evidence is in. So the person says yes and yes. And they're talking about the Amber Heard trial because people are immediately picking sides, and they have just a modicum of understanding of what's going on. The full picture is somewhere in between, and my observation of this is that they were poisoned for each other, and they should have just parted ways, both of them realizing that they were harming each other by staying in close proximity. And unfortunately, that didn't take place. And both, apparently, based on what I've seen in the trial so far, is both of them have gotten hurt, including Johnny Depp's finger being cut off, and the implication that that he might have done it himself. Today, I heard one of the judges. I heard one of the attorneys say, "You've never heard of somebody taking MDMA, cut off their own finger, have you?" And like I said earlier, the witness that was on the stand was, in my impression, just horrible witness. Said no, and then kind of slipped and said yeah, and then looked at the judge like, well, can I continue talking? But didn't. And so it's kind of lost. I think both of them should just shut the hell up and chill and move on. And some of the things that have been said by Heard are just despicable if they had been done to anybody. And I hope that it's misperception and that it didn't really happen, because it's despicable if it did. And so nobody really truly knows except those two. And I don't think that we'll ever truly know. We need time travel. We really do, so that we can look back and go, okay, this is what really happened. So let's continue on, because this is just an opinion piece, talking back and forth about what might be weird. But they speak starting at the Amber Heard trial and end up talking about politics and Ron DeSantis and Biden and all kinds of stuff. Like this here, it says, inflation hasn't been this high in 40 years, and it can cost more than $100 to fill a tank of gas. It's true. Well, it depends on the size of the tank. My tank, it's costing somewhere around $60. So, and I don't have a big car. I mean, I've got a 4-door vehicle that isn't an SUV. So we may have been spared a migration crisis this summer, but only because a Trump-appointed judge blocked the CDC's efforts to end Title 42. We also seem to be teetering on the verge of a recession, which would be bad. Well, we've had recessions before and we've walked away from this. I don't think is an easy recession, this particular one, because I think there's so much money out there that's being aggregated into the billionaires that there is no easy way to get that money back. And there's no way to lower costs because the people, so much control is now consolidated into a few people that we have. I'm referring to it as American oligarchs. Very vastly rich people that are controlling politics. Is it a conspiracy? No. But will people give back power? No. Good luck trying to claw back power and influence and money and control. It's just not going to happen. And it won't happen on either side because one side is very oppressive and wants to impose theological ideology on everybody. And the other side wants to include everybody, including the people who want to turn America into a fascist world. Now, the other side is gaslighting everybody, calling them fascists. So things are a little nightmarish. Like I said, it is turning into the multiverse of madness for me. So let's continue on. The word in tech, and this article was aggregated from The Verge. Stranger Things 4 cranks up everything way past 11. It's kind of a funny thing because Millie Bobby Brown is 11. Anyway, not age. That was her name during the experiments that she was put through. And it's all coming back. But Vecna is going to be the boss, I guess, in this adventure. Stranger Things 4 is like the seasons that came before it. In how it draws inspiration from the pop culture canon of the 80s, making it individual chapters feel like studied homages to the genre cinema of the era. In this fourth installment, though, Stranger Things embraces a newfound sense of itself as something more than a stylized tribute to the creature features and coming-of-age classics that packed theaters decades ago. This is an article over at The Verge, and it's written by Charles Pulliam Moore. And if you are interested in this article, please follow the link. Just go over and read the rest of it. Stranger Things is going to be really interesting. So we've been wanting this to come back, and with it coming back and thoroughly embracing the D&D type of culture, this is going to appeal to this modern age where we can listen to people playing games via podcasts, so live plays. And this is basically a cinematic live play. We're going to get to see these characters roll their dice and make their decisions, roll for initiative, and roll to hit and try and run away and everything else that's associated with D&D, except that we're going to see it emblazoned on the screen, whatever it might be. The size of your screen, I don't think is really going to matter. You're going to get sucked into this, I think. So I hope that this is as good as my vision of it is, but we all have dreams, right? So this is going to be a lot of fun to watch. So Stranger Things 4 starts next week, which is 4 days from now, the 27th. So be prepared. It's over on Netflix. The next article is in the Word in Tech as well. And it is titled, What Happens When Plants Have Stress Reactions to Touch? A 30-year-old genetic mystery has been solved. It has previously been established that touch can trigger stress reactions in plants. However, the molecular models for explaining this process have been quite spartan so far. Now researchers at Lund University in Sweden have found genetic keys that explain how plants respond so strongly to mechanical stimuli. Cracking the code could help lead to higher yields and improved stress resistance in crops in the future. Let's click the link. It'll probably take us over to phys.org. It did. And the article's by Lund University, and they almost have the same racks that I do, it looks like. Because I grow microgreens. I haven't actually for a little while now, mainly because I got pulled away for another field of study, and I was just kind of distracted by a lot of other life stuff, including spinning up more of ohmTown. But this article over at phys.org says when you water your garden plants, they react directly at the biochemical level. With a knife edge cuts a rhubarb stalk, thousands of genes are activated and stress hormones are released. Unlike humans, plants cannot feel pain, but they can react strongly to mechanical stimuli from the human touch. Hungry animals, wind and rain, for example. Well, you know what? I'm going to take a break from that article because I would like to say, what is pain if not mechanical stimuli from whatever is happening to us? Right? Something has to happen to us for us to feel pain. We can feel emotional pain, but physical pain is different than emotional pain. I mean, it is. Emotional pain is much more symbolic of our understanding of whatever is happening to us, and not physical pain where there's a cut on you, and you can actually kind of learn to cope. I guess you could learn to cope with both, but it's ephemeral in terms of emotional pain. But physical pain, you can attribute to something. You have to attribute emotional pain to something kind of nebulous, bad words or some emotion, not necessarily a paper cut. So I don't know. Plants feel pain and their reaction. We just don't call it pain because we don't have the ability to communicate it saying, hey, I feel pain. But the reactions seem to be similar, right? These external factors lead to the plant's molecular defense system being activated quickly, which in turn can contribute to plants becoming more resistant and flowering later. Although the phenomenon has been known since Darwin, there are still many question marks. They should have just said questions. A new study published in Science Advances has examined the complex regulating networks that affect how the plant's defenses are strengthened by external influences. So yeah, like anybody or anything, the more that it is harmed, the more harmed and recovered, it becomes more robust. And even we have a turn of phrase that says that which does not kill us makes us stronger. It's the same ideology. But when you harm a plant, it doesn't become just like humans. We become harder. The plant becomes harder. It becomes less of a succulent or something like that. For instance, you put a watermelon inside a transparent square like they do in Japan and other places, I suppose, but you can do this with anything. You put it inside a plexiglass form and leave it in the sun, and it will grow inside that form. But at some point, that external influence, that harm that's being caused, the mechanical stimuli from the container, will force it to grow inwards. Instead of flowering out or growing out, it has to go somewhere. I would argue that that's kind of what this is doing. The more you abuse a plant, the less fruitful or flowering it becomes. So it's an interesting article. And certainly if you are into understanding kind of nature, then follow that link and you'll get to learn some more about it. Go check it out. This next article is definitely sociological. And it says here in the Word and Tech channel, where this was aggregated to from phys.org, a study was done, and it says that children with same-sex parents are socially well-adjusted. A study by Dr. Merjam Fisher, it might be Miriam, and and colleagues at the University of Cologne's Institute of Sociology and Social Psychology, hadn't even read the article, shows that children and adolescents with same-sex parents are just as well adjusted as those with different sex parents. Now, I don't know if that's really a win, depending on the different sex parents. In this study, 62 6 to 16-year-olds with same-sex parents were compared with 72 peers with different sex parents regarding prosocial behavior, hyperactivity, peer problems, emotional adjustment, and general behavioral problems. The results of the study, behavioral outcomes of children with same-sex parents in the Netherlands, were published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. Let's click the link. It takes us over to phys.org. And it's an article that's written by University of Cologne and posted on phys.org. And let's get into this a little bit here. Previous studies have shown that same-sex parents face significant stress factors related to their sexual orientation, such as experiences of prejudice, unsupported legal contexts. On average, this added stress leads to decreased physical and mental health for same-sex parents, which in turn could lead to adjustment problems in their children. That's if the parents really expose their children to those stressors. I know growing up that there were stressors that I wasn't aware of until I was later in my adult life, mainly because the tone of conversations and my exposure to them were different. That does not happen with everybody, though. So without a doubt, there are some parents that should learn to be cognizant of their child's growth. And sometimes in the air of trying to, quote unquote, keep it real, they shed a little bit too much of their negative stressors onto their kids, and it causes the kids to go into kind of fight or flight mode and stop learning, stop being kids. That's my anecdotal observation. The study says, though, the study's based on unique survey data from the Dutch civil registers and thus provides representative results for families with parents between the ages of 30 and 65. The findings are in line with the large number of non-representative research results. The new findings clearly show that same-sex families have strong resilience strategies to protect their children from prevailing legal hurdles and societal rejection. For example, parents create an environment in which their children receive appreciation and recognition from others, and where other same-sex families provide positive role models. However, it should not be necessary in the first place that parents have to develop these strategies. Agreed. So really what this comes down to is a child is a product of its parents and not necessarily the gender or sexual attitudes of the parents. And I would argue that somebody who has to and is exposed to these other stressors, like society, quote unquote, going against same-sex marriages, might make a person a little bit more compassionate, understanding, and socially strong. But they shouldn't have to. Everybody should just be accepted for who they are and not judged on the fact that they are in a same-sex marriage or not. But there are people out there that are antisocial, and that's what this is all about. If you are raising a kid and you are antisocial and you impose your antisocial behaviors on your child will probably grow up with those same representative traits until they go outside your sphere of influence and they see the world for what it really is, which is social, imminently social. And unfortunately, we have a lot of very wealthy, very powerful, very influential people who are antisocial and are taking from society and rarely giving back, except for where they can personally benefit from that giving, either through kudos from society or tax adjustments, because, the only time you should give is if you get a tax adjustment. You want to know more about this article, go over to phys.org. Do a search for children with same-sex parents are socially well-adjusted. Obviously, you can click the link over at ohmTown or in my chat or in the show notes. Let's continue on to the next article. Summer demand could send oil prices spiking and trigger a global recession, IEA chief warns. A rise in energy demand in the summer could send prices higher and risk a global recession, the head of the IEA has warned. Fida Birol told Bloomberg TV that all players in energy markets should make a positive contribution to avert price rises. Energy prices have risen sharply in 2022 after Russia, a major supplier, invaded Ukraine in late February. Now, this is speaking of the European side of things, because in the United States, we have the ability to pretty much get it from myriad sources, but there is one main supplier in Europe, and that is Russia. That whole kind of wing of Europe is being tremendously impacted by an irrational invasion of Ukraine. That said, I think that raising prices because of a human imposed, or anything, I mean, the supply is still there. Getting it out is the problem. And so if you want to be exploitive, start a war. Apparently that's what you can do, and then the prices rise. But the price for oil has been bouncing around like crazy, and oil makes gasoline. You can get other natural gas and other things in other ways, but oil in particular is the biggest source for power in many countries. Well, the problem here is that this was not a problem until OPEC was formed, and then you could see, and futures were it became a commodity to buy and sell. And all of the, like I said in my previous episode, business school portrays the stock market as a means of leveling the field and lowering the highs and lows, or evening the highs and lows of prices. But if you look at, something like 6 years after OPEC was formed, you'll see the price volatility of oil, and it's because it became very lucrative to manipulate that price, and take and take and take, just because you just happen to be sitting on the land. And instead of everybody treating everybody as human, everybody utilizing the technology that exists, and everybody looking out for everybody, we exploit other groups. And that is a sociological force. It is built into society that there's in-groups and there's out-groups. And when one group has the ability to negatively impact the other group so that it can shut them down further, that's exactly what they do. And to me, it's rather twisted. Let's click the link, just go over to Business Insider, give credit to the writer of this article. Harry Robertson is the author of this article. Obviously, they read the Bloomberg TV article and summarized it in this article over at Business Insider. Man, I said article quite a bit. Anyway, it said, Birol said these efforts were necessary to punish Russia, but warned that they increase the risk for energy markets and the world economy. So what are they talking about? It's all of these controls put, for lack of a better term, controls put on Russia and their economic system. There are companies that are leaving. It's all hindering the Russian economy, and that's really about stifling the war machine. Ukraine should never have been invaded. And just like Turkey right now is stopping, I think it's Norway. So maybe it's Finland. I'm not sure which one right now off the top of my head. But Turkey is influencing who can be added to NATO. And there are two countries, Sweden and I think it's Finland, that want to join. And Turkey is saying no to one of them. Wild that this can take place. I mean, if they meet the requirements, if they meet the demands, then so be it. But what they want is irrational, at least in my opinion. Turkey wants some pretty wild concessions. Anyway, with people exiting Russia and money, the flow of money being stemmed, and really the war is just kind of dragging on, and it's going to become what amounts to perhaps, another Afghanistan kind of thing, but different, because Ukraine is a breadbasket of Europe, and it's being hobbled right now with tons of food that can't leave. And so with other things going on, obviously this is impacting everything in the area, and because everybody else is being impacted, further afield it's being impacted. So even here it says, in the U.S., gasoline prices are set to hit $6 a gallon on average at the pump as the summer driving season kicks off, according to a projection by J.P. Morgan. These companies have billions in profits during and now at the tail end of the pandemic, because they are imposing these high prices. It has nothing to do, in my opinion, with the conflict in Ukraine, with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. This has to do about profiteering off of the conflict. They have margins that are big enough to absorb these changes in the market, and we would have a more even keel in our economy because we have an oil-based economy if they would just allow the margins to remain a little bit weaker for a short period so that they have longer term benefit. But that's not what's going to happen. What I think is sociopathic behavior is going to always win out, because there are too many people that value just the money over the long-term viability of the economy and society. And if we can learn from our mistakes, which have happened countless times now, it seems like every 10 years the things go into turmoil even more, and some people profit from it. All of this is just, again, I say it a lot in my stream, in the podcast, that things just seem really twisted. So Brent crude oil was up again today, 1.06% to $113.74 a barrel, having started the year below 80. And it says WTI crude was at almost 1% higher. So it's just going to trickle higher, ever higher, because there are people that think that there's enough money out there to take, and take. So let's get this electrical, let's get EVs and solar power. At some point, it's going to be the cheaper solution. But I would love to put solar panels up on my roof and some batteries in the garage and be off the grid. But today we're already seeing the market shoot through the roof again, plus 600 over the declines from last week. So the Dow is up almost 640. We're just never going to learn our lessons. We're going to end up with, ultra rich, theologically bent, fascist leaders controlling what we do and how we do it. And one of the first, the fires of Gondor, the first one is being lit with the economy. The second one being lit is Roe v. Wade being overturned. It's the first time ever that it's ever taken rights away in its decisions, versus enumerating them, and it's taking them away. Again, multiverse of madness. I'm going to title this episode The Multiverse of Madness. The next article is over in Hedge Ideas. Starbucks will exit Russia after 15 years, closing 130 licensed cafes. Just going to hurry up and get into this. This is a CNBC article by Amelia Lucas, and I will never learn my lesson. I need to log into this account. Anyway, so Russia's going to suffer another loss of McDonald's and Exxon, and many others are leaving, and now Starbucks, and now people aren't going to be able to get Starbucks flavored coffees, which may not be a loss really, but it's going to hurt the stock quite a bit. 130 locations. McDonald's sold all of their locations to a local franchisee, and it's so easy to do that. I'm pretty sure that person is probably a billionaire. The coffee giant announced Monday that it will no longer have a brand presence in Russia. Starbucks has 130 locations in the country, which account for less than 1% of the company's annual revenue. They are all licensed locations, so the Seattle-based company itself doesn't operate them. Well, that's fine, but they are the supply chain. So Starbucks said it will pay its nearly 2,000 Russian workers for 6 months and help them transition to new opportunities outside of the coffee chain. I'm sure that other people they should have just sold the store to individuals and offer them a internal supply chain, find a way to spin it up internally. Maybe that was too much to ask. But it's 2,000 more people, all because of an irrational invasion. There was no threat there in Ukraine. So let's move on. The next article, I've got about 4 more to go. AMD confirms first PCIe 5.0 SSDs will launch alongside Zen 4. Oh man, the speed of these things are going to be amazing. So AMD has confirmed that PCIe 5.0 SSDs will be timed to release alongside Zen 4 AM5 platform when it releases later this year. It is actively working on the storage industry, or with the storage industry, to ensure that next-gen drives are ready for when the platform goes live. Obviously, hoping that to make it the platform of choice for storage needs. This says heads. Much like it managed with Zen 2 and the support for PCIe 4. AMD has already unveiled plenty of exciting info about its Zen 4 architecture at this year's Computex, from hitting 5.5 gigahertz when running Ghostwire Tokyo to beating Intel's Core i9 12900KS in Blender rendering. So I might actually switch to AMD this year. I'm in need of another system. I'll leave the system that I'm using right now as my streaming machine and spin up an AMD only system. And let's see what happens with that. Oh, so this article is over at pcgamer.com, and it's written by Alan Dexter. Dun, dun, dun. Basically, I did a summary of the article, and there isn't that much more to it, but with DDR5 and PCIe 5 SSDs, things are just going to be so fast, and I love it. I absolutely love it. From nothing to desktop in 3 seconds. We're coming up on the speeds where you turn on the power button and you're at a desktop, almost end-to-end solid state. Pretty nice. So this next article is in the Smack Talk channel, which is about Apple. Mystery Apple network adapter surfaces in FCC filings. It says Apple is working on a network adapter. Let's click this link so that we can see it. I don't know if they're going to have the drawings or not. Let's see. It has an integral battery, 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, USB-C 5 connector, and antenna. The device supports IEEE 802.11 BGN radio, Bluetooth radio, and NFC. But it's called a network adapter. Somehow I don't know how to contend with what this is. Intriguingly, and first spotted by 9 to 5 Mac, the hardware also has 32 gigabytes of storage and 1.5 gigabytes of memory. It also used firmware 19F49, which could be a version of iOS, borrowing a concept used by the Studio display. So what is it? Apple has used external hardware to offer wired networking, such as the Ethernet port in the power brick of the 24-inch iMac, but certainly not with this amount of extra connectivity. Yeah, this is a separate device. I mean, I hope. Okay, so somebody in their comments section over at Apple Insider said that maybe it might be a new airport. I hope they don't do this. I just switched my entire network over to some prosumer grade equipment, and but I loved Apple's networking solution, and then they just ditched it. They just one day they just gave it up, kind of like the HomePod. So maybe this is a networking based HomePod, and not just the HomePod Mini. And if that's the case, then I'm going to have a whole lot more networking and HomePods in my place. So anyway, this article again is over at Apple Insider. Mystery Apple Network adapter surfaces in FCC filings, and it's written by Malcolm Owen. Okay, so 2 more articles. This next one is 1 billionaire was minted every 30 hours during the pandemic, and now 1 million people may fall into extreme poverty every 33 hours, according to Oxfam. Can't really say much about this. The article was aggregated into the Hatch Ideas channel. I am hoping to spin up the Hatch Ideas channel for next weekend, talking about business and only business over the course of the week. And it'll be a weekly show, not a daily show. And it'll be run first on Saturday and then a rerun on Sunday. Then obviously it'll be on demand over at YouTube. But this article over at Business Insider is written by Katie Boone and talks about the fact that a billionaire was minted every 30 hours, but now 1 million people may fall into extreme poverty every 33 hours. And I actually have spoken about this, that you can't have billionaires without extreme poverty because the wealth is concentrated towards the top of, if you want to call it the top. And so there isn't enough for everybody down below because it's all concentrated at the top, and it's concentrated at the top and loaned to the top. The upper middle class and upper class all have the ability to grab onto that money because they are deemed worthy of the risk associated with loans. So it's not like, and I've said this before, and I had somebody else in a discussion sit there and say, well, suddenly a couple of billionaires are the problem with poverty, that there is poverty. But one second. So there are 614 billionaires as of October 2020. And if you start counting every 30 hours, a new billionaire was minted during the pandemic, that means roughly 100 billionaires were made each year. So let's say conservatively that we're looking at close to 850 billionaires. The amount of money that billionaires owns trumps all of the middle class. And the reason why I say it like that is I've just given you an example that it isn't just 2 billionaires like this person said. There's 800 of them. And the amount of money that they make off of the billions that they have control of makes them gather more wealth. And if their investments demand 12%, then of course, everything else has to fall in line to support that growth rate. That's why you have companies that are sitting there demanding that things have a margin of 25%. And it's irrational for a sustained economic system to year after year have 30% margins and growth. You know, if you have 30% margins and 30% growth or 10% growth, it's irrational. You can't sustain it. Well, here we go. Just think of that. There's 800 billionaires in the United States alone. Think about all the rest. I know, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Who is somebody who's streaming on Twitch to say what somebody should be making? I know. I'm familiar with the phrase. Well, let's continue on. You know, I'm not trying to... I'm having discussions. And that's what I'm willing to do, have a discussion. If you change your mind on your own, that's fine. I'm not demanding that you change your mind, but think about the societal impact of 800 billionaires in the United States alone, and then do a search for the number of billionaires in your country. And then look at how much poverty exists in your country, how much lack of education exists in your country, the amount of oppression, how much opportunity. There's so many facets to this that you can't just say one thing across the board. I can in certain places. There shouldn't be billionaires. Oil shouldn't cost 130 a barrel just because of its geographic location and the ability to exploit that, because domestically it doesn't want to get pulled from the ground. You know, there's a whole lot of discussion here, and I can't lay blame to just one thing that's making the world both better and worse. You know, a lot of great things have come because of what amounts to billionaires taking advantage of opportunity. But there's a lot of people out there that could have done the exact same thing, but they weren't born with connections and money already in their pocket. Anyway, the last article for today is in the Mobile channel. What we got wrong about nuclear risk reduction. This isn't about just nuclear energy, but it's in the context of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, and the fact that Ukraine is where Chernobyl is, and, well, nuclear is still a risk. And this article by Heather Williams, who's a PhD and is an opinion contributor, this is an article at The Hill, and they want to make it known that the views expressed by contributors are their own and not the view of The Hill. They just think that it's a valuable discussion, as do I. And they talk about the fact that basically Putin is being a bully and going into Ukraine and even risking an issue with Ukraine because they took over the nuclear power plant that was operational and digging around trenches and whatnot, and even making threats of nuclear war simply because other countries are trying to stop Russia from taking over Ukraine, which is a democratic country. And when you're a totalitarian government, you don't want you don't want citizens making a decision. You want to oppress them and only give them one option: do what I say. And that's kind of what's going on more and more. And it's becoming something where business is the one that is doing all of this. I hazard a guess. Not really a guess. It's exactly what's happening. I mean, businesses are owned by oligarchs in Russia, and it's a known fact. And taking businesses and nationalizing businesses and then giving them to your cronies is fascist. It's cronyism. It's oligarchy, and that's spreading. Fascism and oppression. It's all getting worse. And I feel like in the last 100 and almost 50 days of me doing this show and the podcast, I'm seeing more and more of it because I'm paying more and more attention to the news. So, my show, my stream is based on the news that is coming out of various channels. And unfortunately, it isn't necessarily looking good. I can pick and choose certain articles, sure, that are not politically charged, not sociologically charged, but this is the reality of the world that you're living in. And hiding from it doesn't necessarily, it's not somebody else's problem. I'll put it to you that way. It's not somebody else's problem. So come and talk to me about it. Come to my chat. I'm trying to set it up every day, but my plans got thrown into the wind because other people have influence on me right now. I need to reclose the books on some activities, and it's taking longer than I thought. So at any rate, I am done for the day for today's stream, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Again, I'm Mayor Watt. I'm the mayor of ohmTown. ohmTown is a news aggregation site that you're going to see here, right there. Just go over to ohmTown.com and you can consume the news yourself. And if you know of a news source that you think is valuable and should be added, I'm more than prepared to add it should its efficacy be sound. I'm not really hip to overtly biased material of any particular ideological bent. And I read a lot of news simply so that I am better informed, and that's what I hope that you are willing to do too. So come on over to ohmTown. You just click the link, and there you go. A whole bunch more news. So thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.